not try to sneak out. Go get high and freak out. Let your body speak out. Work it out. Soca music play. Get up and dance. Soca tempo jamming. Get up and dance. Makale chume. Bongo te chupu. Rati we tutu. Hey. Get up and dance. Everybody rise up. In the body. Rise up. Soca.
Yeah, what I was thinking about is if you had
It won't last forever, so always remember. Forget this song we weather. Let us get together. Just a
random.
little longer. You and I.
I'll take up
Soca music play. Get up and dance. Soca tempo jamming. Get up and dance. Makale chume. Bongo te chupu.
or rather, yeah. Belmont boy.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, evening. My name is Melanie McNair. I'm the Senior Director of Public Programming here at the Center for Fiction. Have any of you never been here before? Is it your first time here? Anyone? Oh, welcome. So the Center for Fiction is a literary nonprofit that has a long history in New York City. We started in 1820 as the Mercantile Library 80 years before there was a public library system here. And we're still a library. These are library books here. But we became the Center for Fiction about 25 years ago to focus on the creation and enjoyment of fiction and to encourage people to read and value it. We moved to this building in 2019, and that is the first year that we partnered with the Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival. It's really important for us to continue this partnership. It's very important to me. It's been one of the most meaningful parts of my work here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marcia, one of the founders of the Lit Fest.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here at the BCLF 2024. I am Marsha, also known as M1, part of the trio that runs and manages the Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival. Thank you for also showing up in your numbers for this very special edition of Laureates of the Caribbean Side A, which is a tribute to Mr. Mervyn Taylor, who is a gift to the poetry and storytelling and the oral tradition landscape in Trinidad and in Brooklyn, where he has made his home for many years. The Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival is a not-for-profit organization. We are supported by partnerships, and we're supported by really simple things like the sale of our merchandise in order to keep our programming free and accessible to our people mostly, and we also welcome everyone else into the fold. Laureates of the Caribbean is also the only event in our programming, besides a partnership that we have with the Brooklyn Museum that takes place in August, that focuses solely on poetry and elevating the spoken word and written poetry and in all its forms. This evening, we imported you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, so Laureates of the Caribbean is the only piece of programming that we do that's dedicated solely to poetry. And we gather once a year at the museum for another poetry celebration, which is approached as a partnership with the library. I think I was saying to you all that we are sustained by just like contributions from members of the community, from our partners, and by the sale of merchandise in order to keep our programming free. Honestly, it's the way that we want it. If you enjoy what we're doing, I make an urgent appeal to you to find us, support the work that we do. A lot of this is hard work. A lot of this, believe it or not, in as much as we get contributions from the wider community, what we get from them is not enough to offset the cost of programming. And we hope that we're doing programming at the highest level that represents the excellence that we are well aware exists within the Caribbean community. Part of and some of that excellence, so Mr. Mervyn Taylor represents some of that excellence. For us, it's also important to celebrate our people, the ones who've paved the way for us, the ones who've made real meaningful contributions to the canon while they are here. I mean, we're very good as human beings at giving flowers when people are gone. I'm not sending you anywhere. I just providing a rationale for why it's especially important to tell people all the nice things about them that you need them to hear while they're with you in person. And oh, I was also saying to you that so we brought somebody from Trinidad, right? Like I felt like who could do this the best, and I feel like Mr. Darren Sandy was the best person to celebrate Mr. Mervyn Taylor and lead us down the memory lane and Mervyn's current work that he's doing. Let me just tell you who Mr. Mervyn Taylor is in case you were just passing on Lafayette and end up in here because we had free corn soup in the front. Mervyn Taylor is a Trinidad-born poet and longtime Brooklyn resident. He has taught at Bronx Community College, the New School, and he's also taught in the New York City public school system. He's the author of 7 books of poetry. We have 3 of his books of poetry at the back, and my expectation is when Mr. Taylor's leaving the building tonight, there will be no more copies of his books. Please do us that favor and buy any book on the table today, but mostly let's buy his. Some of those poetry books include The Waving Gallery, and most recently, Country of Warm Snow, which was a poetry book of society recommendation that was listed for the Bocas Lit Prize. Taylor has recently completed a chapbook of poems entitled News of the Living, Corona Poems. And while if any of y'all are getting Corona in this season of the new wave of Corona, that might be a nice book of poetry to read while you're quarantining. A new full-length collection, A Commonplace, is due out in spring 2023, and currently he serves as co-editor on the advisory board of the Slapering Hall Press. Darren Sandy is a Trinbagonian spoken word poet, performer, playwright, creative educator, and artistic director. His most recent publication is The Chaos, published in 2023, a gritty poetry pamphlet. I think we have one more copy in the back. You'll get the drill. Please buy a book. Sandy is the former national slam poetry champion in Trinidad and Tobago, and he spent over a decade working with youth in the performing arts field, and he's committed to expanding the capacity for the performing arts as a sustainable element. He's the co-founder of Borderlines, one of the most dynamic poetry events in his country. Most of all, he's a firm believer in God, his creator and sustainer. And before we pass it on to the gentleman to take on the work of side A, Melanie has something that she wants to share with Mervyn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marsha just said it so well about giving recognitions and moving, because we want to give you your flowers before you leave here
I wish
today.
you would stop using that phrase.
Today.
I wish.
Today.
I wish we would refrain from the flowers thing
Okay.
and the
On
Yes,
behalf of
ma'am.
the City of New York and the Mayor's Office, we would like to present you with this certificate of recognition, the citation, for your contributions to our dynamic cultural landscape through your tremendous accomplishments as a poet and an educator. Thank you so much for all your
Thank you
time.
very much. Thank you, Lee. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Show them. Thank
So
you.
without further ado, we
Thank
can
you
start.
much.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what the rest of my things. All right.
Where is the center of the world? Is it on the edge of a capital in a Belmont home or honed in an NYC street? Is it the last piece in a waving gallery? Or do you find it wading in a sea without a back door, an endless expanse, a West Indian rhythm, what a Brooklyn dance, a vacillation between a Belmont taxi and a subway station, a state of taxi cabs and Maximan, or is it where he is? A diasporic thesis between his feet. This is a man fit to find the pieces that puzzle together the center. Grandfather, father, costume designer, teacher, thinker, poet, diaspora, cross-linker of writing abroad and at home. So let it be known that in Trinidad we value you as our own. Let this be an ode to every word that became verse, that became poem, that became Mervyn Taylor's tune. We are grateful. I sit here honored to be in the presence of fellow countrymen who went the same secondary school as me, fellow Saintsman, big up CIC, master writer. Friends, I want you all to help me appreciate and welcome Mr. Mervyn Taylor. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is Laureates of the Caribbean, side A. It's a two-side cassette, so you all had to be in side B. You all can listen to one side of the cassette and then stay here. So big up on yourself for coming out. All formalities observed. Me and Mervyn go and have our vibes here. To all the viewers on YouTube, all you put things in the comments, share the link with your friends. It's a big thing happening, especially if you're from Trinidad. We want everybody in Trinidad who didn't know about Mr. Mervyn Taylor to know about Mr. Mervyn Taylor. And I'm going to invite you to kick us off with a reading of your choice.
Well, the center of the world. This is the poem I think that starts everything off. And I don't want you to leave here thinking it's the only poem. Center of the world. From here, I should precede this by saying, this came after a long drought. No poems coming, and it's the most desperate thing in life you can imagine. No poems for weeks, for a couple of months, and finally, what do? You kind of say a prayer, you know. Poetry is prayer, by the way. You say a prayer, and it comes at a strange time. This came at 4 o'clock in the morning, and almost wake me up. And the story, I'll give you the whole story, but I wrote all of it on Post-its, little slip, because I didn't want to get up from the bed to go to the desk, and it might fall out my head. So you write it on the Post-its. And I mean scribbling, right? I mean, must have been about 100 of them writing. And then in the morning to get up and look at them and make sure I could read it. And then go and translate it into what you have now. From here, I can see the world. All the people walking down Flatbush Avenue, going into stores, waiting at the bus stop. All the latecomers rushing into the subway, cat a corner from my window, across Ocean Avenue, all the new immigrants in winter wearing too much clothes, the police recruit from Long Island under the awning of the Arab grocer. Salam, I can hear the crack addict, the last of his kind, disappearing between the floorboards, arguing with the Arab chief, the one with the scar on his left cheek, next door to whom the Asians scrape calluses from feet 3 times the size of their own, giving them the design they want, star, crescent, half moon, the flag of any country. I see all 4 seasons pass through the park in winter, the lake shimmering between the trees in autumn, the nervous leaves shaking and falling, the sudden flood of green in spring, and summer. Oh, summer with the smoke of 100 grills, the smell of barbecue, the birthday balloon sailing away from a crying boy, the slap of dominoes on the picnic table, the relentless hawk, a rat dangling from its talons, dripping red onto the cyclist's jersey, the yellow paddle boats on their circular journey around the island that is the ducks' breeding ground, dense, impenetrable. The raccoon that scared us the night after the concert at the bandshell, the night Rudder sang his Calypso blues, where a year ago Odetta made her last appearance, half sitting under a falling moon, and the vet whose shock of white hair stood out among the runners, I don't hear him shout anymore. In the zoo, the enclosure where the bears ate a boy has a higher fence painted with pretty pictures. On Sundays, the drummers still form their circle, and in the evening, horns announce the arrival of the Haitians, their sound atonal, harsh, unrelieved. They move in concentric circles, singing not words, but a series of O's, rising, falling, rising. There's more, but
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. There's a lot of sticky notes there, yeah? I was reading an essay about you, and Myra Malkin in that essay sort of quoted that the more that she reads your work, she feels like the entire body of work seems to be one richly variegated sort of poem. What is the real purpose of your poetry? What have you been writing about all these years?
about everybody. Because they can't tell their own stories, right? They tell it to their children and they tell it to their friends in the kitchen, like Edwige Danticat say, right? Kitchen stories. But somebody has to pick them up, the stories that are worth telling. And most of them will tell you, nobody wants to hear that. Well, I think they do, you know. So every day, there's a new story. There are more people telling you. I'll give you some examples. Run into Cliffy, friend of mine, tall guy on Flatbush Avenue. Cliffy, how you going, boy? He said, boy, I ain't doing so good. And Cliffy is always sharp, you know. He said, boy, the only place we're going to these days is the doctor. I said, so all them sweet clothes and things we're going. He said, well, I take out all my jewelry some days and just put them on when I go into the doctor. So I have on all my chain and everything. He said, and sometimes if I don't go to the doctor, I put it on and I sit down on my couch. And the wife asks me, where you going? She said, I ain't going nowhere. I just put on my clothes, you understand? So these are the stories that you hear from everybody. Everybody has them. And people think they're not worth telling, but they're beyond anything. These people are heroes. Each person in his or her own way is a hero. They survive, they're born knowing that they're going to die, and yet they struggle to live, to pass things on to others, to give people who may have less than they do. Our Shadow say, Mommy used to cut up the dumpling, tin. All the neighbors have to get something, right? So this is how it goes. So my stories, the poems won't finish because I think my ambition was to be a novelist, which I didn't do. And therefore the idea of the story is important to me. So my poems actually are like short stories. Narrations is what they are. And if I put the pen down, then I don't want them to stop coming because what else am I going to do? I taught school for many years and I learned from my students. I'll give you another example of people's stories. I had trying to teach poetry to these youngsters, these young, ambitious boys, you know. They loved rap and they were from the Marcy Project, Marcy Projects? Yeah, Marcy, where Jay-Z comes from, right? Yeah, Marcy. And I'm trying to explain poetry and so on. And I thought they weren't listening enough and they stopped me in the middle of what I was saying and they said, you know what Jay-Z means when he says, when we wear the hard shoes? And I said, well, no, I'm not. I said, and I'm trying to tell them that rap is not as good, I guess, as formal poetry, right? You say, you don't know what the hard shoes mean? When do young people when do young men wear the hard shoes? Do you know, people? That's my question to you. No, young men don't wear hard shoes every day. They wear sneakers all the time. When do they wear hard shoes? Funerals, funerals, funerals. So here's a lesson for me as the teacher. And I stopped being critical of rap from that time on, and I listened to their stories and I told them mine, you know. There are places you go to that you don't come back the same. There are all kinds of stories. When I go home for Carnival, or when I go home, now I go home for longer and longer periods of time. When I go home, I hear things just from people speaking, you know, and I take them in. And it's not like I'm stealing from you. Well, maybe I am in a way stealing, right? But I listen to what needs to be glorified. We watch movies, we watch TV, and in a country like this, we know who they hold up as their heroes, you know. But then I watch, for example, with the Olympics recently, with what's his name and his son, the big basketball player.
LeBron James.
LeBron, right? With LeBron and Steph Curry, and they had the glory for the great U.S. team and so on and so on. But what about the people that nobody wants to talk about, nobody talks about? But I find out about those people are worth praising too. The young man who beat Noah in the 100, was it in the 200? Yeah. And he had his mom passed away and he had her name on his sneaker. That's heroism, that's great stuff, you know. There's a runner from, I forget which country she comes from, a young woman, and they call her the Petticoat Princess. She runs, she didn't have money to buy athletic clothes to run her races and so on. So she ran in a petticoat and bare feet. She's worth writing a poem about because she doesn't have all the great training and all the clothes with the stripe down the side and so on, but you got to write about her. I'm sorry, yes, you asked a question?
No, it was answered. But in all this time, my brother, you have been more or less in Brooklyn for how long?
A lot of years, 50
yeah.
odd, maybe, yeah, 50 plus.
That's a lot of time. And I know that in your work, timekeeping became an important concept. Like why do you consider the documentation of time so important, and why do you give it that much of critical attention?
Well, Marley said it, right? With all the things that we can do as human beings, no one can stop the time, he said, you know. And my brother said something interesting. My brother passed away about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he was amazing. He was really the poet. He didn't write his stuff down, but everything he said was reason to just knock you out, you know. His favorite question was, what's the difference between attitude and behavior? Nobody has answered that question yet. I can't. But the idea of time, right, and how who separates time? Men really are the ones who design the idea of years and hours and days and so on. We really have put numbers to time so that we can keep track of ourselves. Otherwise, there'd be just chaos, right? And we have assigned that. But time in poetry becomes something different. You can go back and forth as often as you want. I'll give you an example. I read the news one morning about a man who walked into the oil fields, I forget where it was, Petrotrin, and walked in past the security guard. Our security is funny, is laps, you know. Walked past the security guard, up a ladder, and dove into a tank full of crude oil.
Oh, man.
They managed to retrieve his body after a while, right? And then the story goes back that he was brokenhearted, that this was a suicide and so on. But where did it take me as a poet or as a writer? I thought about this business of what level of desperation one must reach to do that, right? And it brought me back to a movie I saw at the Olympic Theater in Belmont. You would know about that.
I don't know.
It is now a church, but the Olympic Theater, I saw a movie um, an Italian movie called Seven Beauties. And in it, there's a scene in a German prison camp with the Jews lined up. And so there was a plan to escape, a plan to go against the Germans. So, but the young man who was supposed to take care of business became afraid at the last minute. And to show him how to be fearless, one of the older prisoners ran from his spot, ran down between the line between the Jews and the Germans, ran all the way down, and dove headfirst into a tank full of human waste. Dove into shits, as I may say, just dove headfirst, and killed himself. But the scene in Trinidad, in that man going into the tanker, and this man diving into a dumpster, that's where it took me back. So time becomes something that is more elastic in the poem, that I can move from one event to the next. I can go back to my father, and I can bring him into New York and say, I see his jacket hanging in the window. And I can do that. So time is, in other words, I betray the idea of constraint, being constrained by time. Poetry can do that.
Indeed, and that kind of leads into the next question. I mean, we're talking about, I don't want to talk about no flaws, right? but I mean, your last collection, it's called The Last Train, right? I think that's very different from No Backdoor, where it's just like endlessness, but now like there's a time stamp on it in a kind of way, The Last Train. How do you think like how mortality, or the concept of viewing mortality, how does that influence you as a writer as you get older?
Well, some days I don't feel old. Some days when the legs are working good and the heart is beating properly, I'm fine. Somebody said it once, right? That the kid in an old man is always there. You know, an old lady, there's a little girl still in there full of wonder about what she sees, you know. So the years pile up, but you do what you can, you know. The Last Train is deceptive because the title I had for the book originally, and this is, I don't want to make it too long a story. I wrote a poem called Bureau of Sewers. My friend Keith Louis was in a home in Brooklyn, and I went to see him. And on the way back from seeing him, the bus filled up with school children. And there was a building we went by, and the school children were, you know how school children, they're full of energy and crazy. When I looked out the window, I saw this sign on the building, it says Bureau of Sewers. And I wanted to, I wrote the poem about Keith Louis, and I wanted to call the book finally Bureau of Sewers. My dear friend Susanna, who is in Spain, she hired a donkey to walk with. It's crazy. White folks do crazy stuff. She and her husband, you're welcome. She and her husband hired a donkey to walk, not to ride, to walk with. And I tried to sing to her a couple of verses from Sparrow's song, right? The old man, the little boy, and the donkey. You know that one? You're too young to know that, right? But it's a calypso about an elderly man walking with his son and a donkey. And they're walking, and the people in the neighborhood, they keep criticizing him. They say, look at this stupid old man. Both of them walking, and the donkey, they have a donkey. So then the man listened to the people, and then he got up on the donkey. Then somebody said, look how cruel they are, the poor donkey. The two of them weighing down the donkey. So the man gets off, and then he leaves the little boy. They said, the little boy have the father, poor old man walking. You can't do anything with that, can you? Right? So, Bureau of Sewers, that's Susanna, same person I'm talking about. She said, you can't call your book Bureau of Sewers. because the critics, when they get ready to write about it, are going to talk about, well, maybe the poems are not that good, right? Maybe, so you can't. And I kind of listened, and I said, no, you should just do what you want to do. Bureau of Sewers, right? So then I came up with another title. I called it A Commonplace, which is the one that you read, right? A Commonplace. So that's kind of bland, right? Commonplace. I say it's not bland. There are poems about Jamaica. There are poems about New York. There are poems about Trinidad. So all these places have something in common, right? And there's a great thing from that Kismet, from the play, right? And I saw your face and I ascended out of the commonplace into the rare, right? So the commonplace is not terrible. I say, no, it's too ordinary. So somewhere in there, the mention was made that about last train to San Fernando. And my friend said, of course, last train? That is it, last train. And she's worth listening to because she's often right. So this is where the title, Last Train, came from. But I want to say one more thing about that.
Yeah.
Last train really means last train, we're getting ready to leave, you better get on. That's what it means. It doesn't mean my last train. It means last train, so you better hurry up and get on. That's what it means.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, this time you could give us another poem.
I'm going to read you something about when I went back home one time. Yeah. If I can find it, yeah. A few years ago, I went home, and I was in Port of Spain, trying not to look foreign. I don't put on fancy stuff. I'm the most raggedy person in Port of Spain you could hope to see, on purpose, right? But they said they can tell you anyway, right? Something about your color and so on. I say, nobody don't know. Somebody's yawning, that's terrible. I must be boring the hell out of you, boy. I'm sorry. You're cold?
Stretching her jaw.
You want my jacket? I'll give you my jacket. Focus on what I'm doing? Is that what you said? You're lucky this is not my house. Pops, fathers, uncle. These are my new names, given to me by complete strangers. Suddenly, I'm related to the young man who moves over in the taxi, to the girl clerking in the hardware store who asks, "Uncle, you getting through?" I suppose I am. I've come through crowded Port of Spain, misjudged the high pavement, at the last minute writing myself. I've managed to remember where the taxi stand is, patiently waiting till I hear, "Belmont, fathers?" I look for the priest who must have been put out from the cathedral, which is under reconstruction, for a cleric collar. How do all these people think me family? From the tall-hatted Rasta smoking his cheroot to the Indian who shaved fins from the fish in my bag. In what way do we all resemble? I take the seatbelt the woman in the back seat is shaking to remind me, "Buckle up, Daddy." I snap it in and catch a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. She is at least as old as I am. I'm tempted to say, "Thank you, daughter." But I say, "Thank you, dear. Thank you."
So, when was your last time in Trinidad?
Last March, yeah.
In leaving Trinidad and coming to Brooklyn, what do you consider to be the greatest thing that you lost?
Lost?
Yeah.
Things that are important, I guess, during one's lifetime, right? I missed my mother's passing, not being home. That was probably my toughest moment, being away from Trinidad. My mother passed. I had been home to see her the year before when she took ill, My brother and I went home together. But the year when she died, I was not able to travel. And that remains a really sore moment for me. I remember being in a rooming house, the rooming house where I was staying, and that it was summer and it was hot, and not that that night it seemed not a breeze was stirring in the city. Somebody told me, "Well, why don't you come? We're having a barbecue. Why don't you come and maybe you would feel." No, I don't want to go barbecue. My mother just passed away. But that I miss, and I think all of us who leave and stay away, we may not voice it, but I think we suffer a kind of guilt. We feel in a way that, not feel, that Eric Williams said it right, that it's a part of the great brain drain. A lot of people left the island. And I'm not saying we should not or should have stayed. I'm just saying what it cost. It cost a lot. I think a lot of young people could have used some direction from those of us who left. I think we had something to give to those young people. And we still can, right? Being away doesn't mean that you can't share what you have gained in being away. What I think I gained from being outside, besides my wonderful kids and grandkids, I think you learn that you meet people that you would not have met otherwise. I wrote a poem about the whole. I went to Haiti about 5-6 years ago. A friend invited me there, and I thought about that demarcation between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and I thought what it would mean, right, for a Haitian. When 9/11 happened, I witnessed it from the school, my school where I was teaching, the public school in Williamsburg. We looked out the window and right across the water there were the Twin Towers. And I literally watched them melt like candles and go down. And later that day, to get back into Brooklyn where I live, and for my fellow teachers, these women, one of them was Haitian, and she and an Arab woman, the Haitian woman had their head tied in an African style. And I remember them retying their hair in a different way to look different, and not in the style that they had before. And I remember that Haitian girl driving me all the way from Williamsburg across Brooklyn. We ran into all kinds of stops along the way and police checkpoints and so on, but we managed to get back home. And I wrote a poem called Marie and Juan. And I thought about, in a place like New York, a Haitian girl could dance the bachata with a Dominican guy. They could dance happily together, a Haitian woman and a guy from the Dominican Republic. But as Edwidge wrote in The Farming of Bones, right, that line between Haiti and DR is a crucial demarcation. And so if you travel, there are possibilities that are open to you that you may not get if you stay in one place. It's the price you pay, however you do it.
Whatever it means to be Caribbean or Trinbagonian, do you think somebody could lose it though, like totally in the diaspora, like you come back home and you're just a different person?
Well, you may not lose it entirely, but it has an effect on you, right? I remember when I went back home 2 years after I first came. I went back home when my mom wasn't well, and I went to the Treasury where I worked after high school. I worked there until I left and came away to Howard. I went to school at Howard. I went back home after 2 years, and I went to the Treasury full of anticipation. I'm going to meet all my old friends, the old workers, and so on. And I walked past these women, what we call them maids in those days, but they weren't maids. They worked to keep us in good health. They served all kinds of wonderful drinks in the afternoon and so on. And I walked past them and I said, hey. And one woman said to the other, who's that? And she said, you don't remember, there's Taylor, he worked in Pay Branch right there, you don't remember that? And she looked at me and she said, she didn't say it to me, but she said it to her. She said, boy, America well spoiled up with boys. Yeah. This is after 2 years being away. She said, America spoiled up with boys. And I didn't know what change she saw, you know. I have no idea what the change was until somebody else said something and said, a guy who had been at Howard with me, and he said, she probably thinks that you look a little harder. And I wrote about that recently, that there's something that can happen to you when you go to a place like a big city, cold, strangers, that there's a kind of a shell that can harden on you to make you deal with what things you don't know. You know, the first thing that hit me when I came out of the airport in New York, when I walked out of Kennedy and those sliding doors open, I had never heard that much noise in my life. And it was nothing special. There were no bombs going off, and it was just buses and cars and so. But the noise was like a shock to my senses. And I think it does something to you if you're not from there. You know, if you're from Burkina Faso, if you're from one of those quiet places, if you're from Tobago, if you're from Grenada, wherever you're from, that it is a real adaptation you have to do to come to terms with it. I watch some of these young boys, and I can tell they're Sudanese. I watched them in Brooklyn here, right? They're beautifully black, they're real dark boy, and they dress in their own style. You know, they're like the real saga boys of their place. And I wonder about the toll it takes for them to survive, you know, what they're up against. But of course, now it might be a little easier because there's a whole lot more communication, right? More understanding of what it means to be here. When I first came here in 1964, there was you remember, we used to take a real pleasure after Carnival in bringing back all the newspapers with all the pictures of the mass and all kind. Nobody needs that anymore. They see the Carnival here before we finish play mass in Trinidad. So. But that's what I'm talking about. There's something that can harden. And you can get it back maybe when you go home, but it takes some doing to unwind, to come out of that shell. Sometimes you're not conscious of it. You can live your whole life not knowing, you know. My only thing, salvation, is that sometimes my kids do things that remind me. My son went home when he was 4 years old with my dear cousin, and he wouldn't come. He said, "No, I'm not going back," and he stayed for four years in Trinidad. Yeah. So now when I talk to him and he asks me, "How far is so and so?" and I tell him, he say, "Oh, you mean it's a good pull." Small things like that. Those little things are what inform my poetry, is what I'm trying to say. Those moments, you know, they do something. They help you to go to the next quarter-mile post, you know. In Trinidad, I was never a country boy, right? I born and grew up in Belmont, grew up in Port of Spain. So the country was always foreign to me. I went on vacation to Beach one time, supposed to spend a month.
Where you going?
You know Beach?
Yeah, no Beach.
deep country. I went to Beach one time, and again, you say you're a Trinidad boy, but it depends on where you're from, right? Some people don't want to go country, you know. I growing up in Beach, but when we reached there, the taxi driver wouldn't take us to where we were going, you know. He said, "No, I don't go no further than here." And I said, "Me, I don't go further than here." He said, "Because Mandinga tigers about here now." I said, "Who Mandinga tigers?" This is a young gang. They say we're cutting off heads and stuff, you know. Anyway, went to this place and nothing but mosquitoes. I thought it was going to be just wonderful sand and a river and all that. It was dark. It was a cocoa estate, and I was warned that there were snakes under the cocoa. So I got there, and the day after I got there, I wrote a letter to my mother in Belmont. And after 3 or 4 days, the host and I think we realized at the same time that this was not the place for me. So she got her husband to walk me out the road to take a taxi to town. And when I got back to Port of Spain, to South Key, and I saw the lights, and I knew, you would not believe, I was the happiest person in the world. So I can't say I love the whole of Trinidad.
Yeah.
But I walked home. I got home, and I was walking towards my house, and my mom is sitting in the veranda talking to a neighbor. And what do you think and in those days the mail worked. The mail don't work now, but the mail worked. And she's reading the letter I wrote her to the neighbor. And so her head is down. So the neighbor looks up and sees me, and the neighbor says to Gata, look who come in. And when I walked to the gate, she shook her head. She said, tell me if I don't know my son. And you know why she knows her son? Because before I left, she stuck a $5 bill in this pocket. She knew that I would be taking a taxi. Anyway, that's a long way of telling you how it feels to go home, how it feels to be away. You know, you give up something and you gain something else, you know. But to be fair, I live in a part of Brooklyn that often feels just like I'm in the middle of Trinidad. Because the pan come right under last Sunday, the steel band passed right under my window there. I'm right on Prospect Park, so everything is right there. The drummers are on a Sunday, the drummers are there, and the Haitians come out of there. Somebody explained to me how the Haitians know to gather. I don't see a flyer, I don't see anything. No.
Vibes.
No, they don't. There are no flyers. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, you will see like 2,000 people come out of Prospect Park, and they're blowing that they call it the rara, right? That's the music that's coming out, and they come out of there. Nobody summoned them or anything, but they just know. And I think we could learn a good lesson from the Haitians. We need to know how to call the troops together when we're ready.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to open the floor. We will take one question from the audience, and then we have some special remarks coming down at the end, but we'll read one more poem before that. So we'll take one question from the audience now. Anybody has any questions? We have one question down to the back there.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned in passing at the beginning of your remarks that poetry is prayer. I'm curious if you're say a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
All right, let me just repeat for the online viewers. So he was referencing your earlier comments about poetry being prayer, and he wants to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the first to say that for sure. Derek Walcott said it earlier on, right? That poetry is like prayer. Because in a way, it is an appeal. An appeal, you talk about a condition, sometimes an unbearable condition, and you're looking for an answer. But really, you know there's no answer. Nobody really knows the answer to this. But you state it in a way like you know that somebody will hear your call, you know, and you're really asking a question most times, you know. In novels, people write a story. There's a beginning, and then there's the middle. There's some kind of interaction, and then there's the end. But the poem remains almost open-ended all the time. You know, like almost ends with "I really don't know." You know, you think you could help me with this? You know, and what is wonderful is that people read these poems and they come back with different answers. You know, people see different things. You know, I'll give you an example quickly. Somebody, that same Susanna, God bless her, sent me a poem in which a woman says she only saw her parents kiss twice in their whole lifetime. They raised all these children, but they kissed twice. And the second time was when she came out of a mastectomy operation. That's the only time she saw that gentle moment between her parents, you know. And I said, wow. There's another poem that says, Sharon Olds has a great poem in which she looks at a picture of her mother and father outside a university where they went to, and she says, I wish I could have written this before to tell you, don't marry her. In other words, whatever their romance was, it didn't end well. And she said, I wish I could go back to when you two were standing there and say to you, don't marry, don't get married. But of course, it's not possible, right? So it's a kind of a prayer. We throw it into the universe to see if something would happen. And somebody else might read that and maybe become aware, you know, like that.
Okay. So we have room for one more question, just in case anybody wanted to ask. Any other question? We good? Everybody good? Very comfortable. Good.
Everybody good?
Yeah, right. So we'll take our next poem, the final poem, to round off the set. And then we have one more thing that we want to share with you after.
I was going to read a poem called When We Were West Indian. But I don't think I will.
You set up the people there, man.
Well, okay, so if you insist. Okay, all right. When we were West Indian, you know, we don't call ourselves that anymore, right? In the 20s, Uncle Jim was the city's first black electrical inspector. And every night, his brother Adolph changed suits to go dancing at the Savoy. Since then, we've kept coming, bodies wrapped in heavy wool, riding the subways between Harlem and Brooklyn. And in summer, the Bay Bell up the Hudson, the girls making kuya mouth at the one who was late and jumped, whose shoe fell in the water. On the street where America keeps her money, we found jobs, saga boys in suits with vents up to here. Some of us married the first girl we met, some never. On 42nd Street, we saw Superman ask Lady Liberty to dance, mascara running down her face. We renamed Flatbush Juve City, declared it on the signpost by Woodruff, where Jerry, the jeweler, held court on the history of the steel pan. 2 toes he lost in a diabetic war. Not far from there, the poet, overlooking Prospect, wrote his verse on Post-its, afraid that on a trip to the desk he might forget, might miss the drums of the Haitians streaming out of the park, the officer in white not understanding a single word they were saying, the aggrieved chorus they were chanting. And after all the costumes, the Borokeets and the Perrots, the last mass that we settled on was CB, that being as American as we could get. The scent of our callaloo hung in every hallway, and the smell of rum in every palace where one night the prettiest of the bad girls died. The high priest filling his mouth and spraying her face in vain. We tumbled out of these places at 10 in the morning, on long avenues and blinding light, hearts racing to record such memories as we could afford. We found ourselves stranded in between the 2 countries we call home.
Thank you very much. Yeah. At the Brooklyn Caribbean Lit Fest, we are honored to have joining us this evening the Consul General from Trinidad, Mr. Andre Laveau, and he's going to share a few words. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. And good evening, Mervyn.
Thank you.
So good to be here. I'm sorry I was so late. The weather made my journey much longer than it should have been. But I'm just going to be very brief, just to say how proud I am to be here. To hear, I heard probably half of your presentation, but I know a bit about you, and I know it seems that you were a public servant.
Yes.
And it seems that, well, I know a little bit about public servants and their mentality. Public servants are very sacrificial people. And those close to them sometimes don't understand the way they're coded. They just can't stop serving, and sometimes that serving takes them to, high levels of sacrifice that they didn't plan on. And I know that you've also given much energy to at-risk youth and so on. Yes. And I'm pretty moved and interested by that, because I think that if young people have means of self-expression, they'll be less risky. Okay, if they're taught to express themselves, they'll be less materialistic, and they'll stop comparing themselves to people who they consider to have, and they will simply be contented in finding themselves. So I'm pretty interested in that, and I wish you well in that pursuit. I did ask a couple of people about you. Oh. And they said, Mervyn? oh, Mervyn. Yeah, what happened to Mervyn? Yeah, so it seems, I think he was in the States and so on. So we're glad that you are exporting our culture. You're exporting our values I know that you've alluded to the fact that, yes, one can lose, a bit of a sense of who he is, but sometimes environments make you find yourself even better than you would at home by the demand that society makes on you to find yourself and to be a blessing to those around you. So thank you very much. I enjoyed the half of your presentation that I did here.
Well, you can also get a book.
Yes. Yes, and on behalf of my wife Haley, who's here, I congratulate the 3 M's again, Melanie, Marissa, and Marsha, yes, yeah, for this wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks very much, Mervyn, for having this conversation. That was a pleasure, and we had to keep in contact and do things.
Before we and let me just say very quickly, these young ladies who are running the BCLF, they are just incredible, and it's amazing to see. And they certainly picked the right man for the job here. This guy has been nothing but professional. Yeah, beautiful, man. Thank you.
All right, so that was side A. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to flip straight over to side B. Trust me, you want to be here. It's from Cuba all the way to Port of Spain. It's poetry, it's music, it's vibes, it's energy. In the meantime, get a book, get your book signed, and support the Brooklyn Caribbean Literature Festival. Yeah. That's nice, man. People. I hope I ain't over talk you. Nah.